Welcome to Midweek Politics from Northampton, Massachusetts, November 11th, 2009. Almost forgot the name of the show, Lewis, which would not be good.
Wouldn't be the first time.
And I'll tell you, I know exactly why it is. It's because this Fort Hood shooting has really got me, walking on edge here. And it's an unbelievable story. And I've been following it pretty closely, I guess, at least as closely as anyone else. I don't know, for lack of a better term. I don't know how closely you've been keeping an eye on the situation, and we'll go through all the information kind of from start to finish. But what's your impression of this thing, Lewis?
It's crazy. And right before Veterans Day.
Right. And seemingly a lot of the memorial services in the last couple of days almost blending in with Veterans Day, including Barack Obama's visit to Texas himself. So if you haven't been following this story, I guess we'll just start from the beginning, which is that on November 5th, a gunman opened fire in the Soldier Readiness Center of Fort Hood, Texas, which is, as far as I know, the most populous U.S. military base in the world. He killed 13 people, wounded 30 others. The gunman's name is Major Nidal Malik Hasan, who's a U.S. Army psychiatrist and a major in the U.S. Army. He himself was shot and seriously injured by a civilian police officer who was also wounded multiple times in the exchange of gunfire. Hasan entered his workplace at about 1:34 p.m. He took a seat at an empty table at the center, bowed his head for several seconds, then stood up and opened fire at soldiers who were coming through cubicles in the middle of the room on a crowd gathered for a college graduation ceremony that was scheduled for about 25 minutes later in a nearby theater. He had two handguns. It's not clear yet if both were fired during the shooting. One of the guns used, he purchased at a civilian gun store. He did not get that gun through the military. At the start of the attack, Hasan reportedly jumped up on a desk and shouted, "Allahu Akbar," Arabic for God is great, before firing what many are saying are over 100 bullets in the processing center. Sergeant Mark Todd, who's a civilian police officer, said he was firing at people as they were trying to run and hide. Then he turned and fired a couple of rounds at me. I didn't hear him say a word. He just turned and fired. A medic who treated Hasan, who is the suspect, said the pockets of his combat fatigues were full of pistol magazines. Witnesses also reported that Hasan appeared to focus on soldiers in uniform. 13 people, 12 soldiers and 1 civilian were killed. 11 of them died at the scene and 2 later on in the hospital. 30 others were wounded before Hasan was shot at least 4 times by local police officers, including Sergeant Kim Munley, who was herself injured by shots from Hasan. So what we're saying here, Lewis, is that there was an exchange. There was an exchange of gunfire between these two people, and fortunately, the suspect Hasan was shot enough times to disable him. And fortunately, Sergeant Kim Munley was not. Even though she was shot multiple times, she survived and she's okay.
Right.
Munley had arrived on the scene within 3 minutes of receiving the report of an emergency at the center. Upon arrival, she encountered the shooter, Hasan, leaving the building in pursuit of a wounded soldier. Munley and Hasan exchanged shots. Munley was hit 3 times, twice in the left leg, once in her right wrist, which knocked her to the ground. In the meantime, another civilian police officer arrived and fired at Hasan. Hasan was hit and he was down from all of these shots. Todd approached the wounded shooter, kicked the pistol out of his hand, and placed him in handcuffs as he came unconscious. This whole thing lasted 10 minutes. And you know, Lewis, we hear about a lot of these incidents, and then as they're recounted, it somehow comes out that they lasted 90 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. This actually lasted 10 minutes. So we have to assume it must have felt like an eternity to those that were in there. I can't even imagine.
I know. That's crazy.
10 full minutes of this back and forth.
And usually, even in incidents where someone has like an automatic rifle, it's very rare that this many people are killed. And I mean, 13 people killed,
30 wounded.
30 wounded. I mean, either this guy's a sharpshooter or I don't know. I can't even, that never happened.
Well, he fired 100 shots.
Well, I mean, I guess over the course of 10 minutes, if he's not stopped, I guess that's what happens.
So initially, 3 soldiers were believed to have been involved in this, but the 2 other soldiers detained, other than Hasan, were released, and it doesn't seem that they had any involvement. As a result of this incident, Hasan, the shooter himself, was hospitalized. He was initially on a ventilator under heavy guard. and by November 9th, he was reported to be conscious and able to talk. He's being held and treated at an undisclosed area of a medical center in Texas. He is an American-born Muslim of Palestinian descent. So instantly, the speculation started about his past. Bear in mind, this is an Army major that we're talking about. So this is a horrible incident. It immediately started speculation about the background of the situation. Who is this guy, Hasan? What's his background? Do we have any information about anything he may have been involved with? We have learned that Hasan had been counseling many, many soldiers who had been to Iraq and Afghanistan, and in many cases, multiple times, multiple tours they had served. And they were telling him day after day some really graphic stories about their experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. And as stressful as that could be, there was early speculation that just hearing those stories day after day could have turned him into a killer, a mass murderer. And the consensus after that, in talking to mental health experts, so-called mental health experts that were all over the radio and TV media, the consensus was just hearing those stories, it could be very stressful and it could affect him significantly, but it wouldn't turn a so-called normal person into a mass murderer. And not that we're mental health experts, but that seems logical to me. I can't imagine that to anybody just being exposed to those stories would turn you into a mass murderer.
Right. I was under the impression that he was about to be deployed to Iraq.
So there is some information that there was a possibility he would be deployed to Iraq, and he had for a long time been talking about how he doesn't agree. He's concerned about going into Muslim countries, sending Muslims into Muslim countries to essentially kill fellow Muslims for a number of different reasons. More research after the fact turned up that Hasan had actually come to the attention of federal authorities at least 6 months before this attack because of some internet postings he made which discussed suicide bombings and other threats. Authorities said at the time that they hadn't definitively attributed the postings to him, but they were pretty sure. He's also believed to be strongly opposed to military activity by the U.S. against Muslims and had allegedly spoken in support of actions such as suicide bombing and armed resistance to U.S. forces. It's believed that Hasan had previously attempted to contact Al-Qaeda directly, though the FBI said that at the time there was no evidence of co-conspiracy of any kind or any kind of terrorist plot that he was involved in. My question is, what kind of Al-Qaeda contact is not concerning, right? What kind of Al-Qaeda contact would just be casual Al-Qaeda contact, the type we shouldn't be worried about? We don't know all the details, but that's definitely a question that comes to mind to me.
Right. I doubt it's like a family member, you know?
Exactly. And if it were...
Well, there's even more cause for concern.
Is that not cause for concern? That's exactly right.